Alrighty, folks, we are up and we are live on Facebook, and our Zoom webinar is a go. Welcome, greetings. This is Robert Smith. I'm the Associate Professor of History and Director of the Center for Urban Research, Teaching and Outreach at Marquette University, along with my partner, Adam Carr. You want to say a few words, Adam?
Hey, I put on my nice Brewers hat today for this meeting, but we can't figure out video, so that was in vain. I do a bunch of things around Milwaukee, and one of the great privileges of my life has been being involved in the March on Milwaukee 50th anniversary, which has since spilled over into this commitment that we continue moving forward on exploring the story of the open housing marches in public. So this is the last event of our monthly series. I'm really excited. This is maybe the one that I was most excited about because I feel like we're going to get into dimensions. I love the historians, but we're going to get into different dimensions of the story today.
Absolutely. And what we are doing today, we are going to hear from some of our activists around town. So we're going to continue with our exercise of using the images from the open housing marches as the teaching instruments. And then we're going to get into some images from today. And what we're going to do is give our panelists, our esteemed panelists, the opportunity to share some of their thoughts about the images, and then get us into a conversation about how we are continuing to battle some of these very important issues today and the work that they do. But as we always say, history is fun. We are going to have a good time. Let me give a short introduction to our panelists. Keisha, if you can go back to that first slide, that would be awesome. Our panelists today include some very awesome women in our city who are doing remarkable things. Sharlen Moore from Urban Underground, as well as Amanda Buchanan, who works over there with her, our local activist Camille Mays, and also Ronda Davis. Wonderful women. Thank you all for joining us today. Just want to give you a second to say hello. If you all just want to say a quick round of hellos, we'll get this show started more formally with our images. Sharlen, you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone, and Rob and the rest of the folks that have put this together. Adam, thank you all so much for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Amanda, say hello for us.
Hey, everybody, it's Amanda. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, bring the energy. Love it.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. It's Amanda. I'm just grateful for this opportunity to be here with you all today, and I'm ready to just talk about some really great history. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Welcome. Camille Mays. We know the name. Camille, I haven't actually had a chance to sit down and talk with you, so I'm really excited about today. Say hello for us, Camille.
Hi, everybody. I'm always excited to talk about the people and the movement to better the people. So I'm here for this discussion.
And
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And Rhonda, say hello for us, please.
Hello, everyone. I am used to working in the background, but I am very grateful and honored to be invited to be a part of this conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you. So here's the fun part, folks. We are going to show some really cool images that we've used in our lectures about the open housing marches. Our goal is to use these images to engage young people with their history and to let them know how important young people have been in the journey for civil and equal rights, not only here locally, but nationally. And so as we get into our photograph exercise, keep in mind that we are also wanting to make sure young people are thought of and considered as we give our comments. And so, Adam, how about you tell us what we're going to do with these images?
Absolutely. We have two sets of images that we're going to go through. The first one is of the open housing marches. They're the ones that we've been looking at in prior weeks, but we're going to get a different take on these. Then we'll kind of see how this goes. We're playing pickup basketball as usual. We might do some meme making. I have some of the memes ready to show you from past ones. That will make more sense a little bit. Then I also have a quick deck of images compiled from the last handful of years of what activism has looked like in Milwaukee in this last stretch. So, these images, again, I know some of our panelists will be seeing these for the first time, and that's what's exciting to us about them, is to kind of get everyone's fresh responses.
All righty, and so we are going to we're going to chunk this so that it's functional for teaching. And so we're going to show the images, have some conversations about them, and then we'll open the audience up for some Q&A as we begin to wrap up our conversation later in the hour. So, Adam, you ready with your images?
Let's do it.
Panelists,
all right,
we want you to tell us what you see, tell us what you feel, and we are going to jump right in this thing and tear the Band-Aid off.
And actually, I'm gonna do one round for the whole thing, and then we'll come back to the beginning and respond. So these images are from the open housing marches, which took place a little over 50 years ago. This is at St. Boniface, what used to be behind North Division High School. It's since been torn down. These images, I went to great public schools, never saw them growing up. They're dramatic, they're intense. I think they, in some ways, paint a picture of a community hungry for justice and for liberation, and a community, reflecting just the headlines we see in today's newspaper, an almost equal and opposite response of systems and institutions essentially there to reinforce racism, particularly anti-Black racism. These images show, I think one of the things that we found crucial, and this is an image, we'll make this point, this house, the Freedom House, is burned down by the MPD. The first firebomb inflicted upon the NAACP in Milwaukee back then was by a local chapter of the KKK. Sometimes we think about images like this existing down south, really far away from places like Milwaukee, but these guys, in the same way some of the marchers are still around and amongst us today, these guys probably are too. So these images, these dramatic images, something like this, I did not grow up in the city of Milwaukee thinking that, or knowing at all about our civil rights movement, just how dramatic, how spectacular it was. That not only was it dramatic and spectacular, there are those such as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. who looked at Milwaukee and said, wow, I deeply admire what those folks are doing up north. And a lot of times these aren't lessons we learn about our own city. This is an image we see, but this one is maybe more powerful. It's about estimates as many as 20,000, maybe 15,000 people on Wisconsin Avenue as a response to Martin Luther King's assassination. So these images aren't somewhere far away from Milwaukee. This is Wisconsin Avenue. This is where the Riverside Theater is, where that subway is, where the Planet Fitness is, where the new Grand Avenue Mall is being built. This is our city, and I think in a lot of ways, these images are ones that we've been deprived of them as Milwaukeeans. So I guess in some ways that's what Rob and I have taken great pleasure in, is sharing these images with people who might be lifetime Milwaukeeans and care a lot about the movement, but yet may never have seen this specific set. So that's my little intro. And with that, Rob, why don't you tell me where to navigate? And panelists, let's start with this one. Can you guys talk a little bit about what you're seeing this image? We call this image analysis, kind of the who and what comes to mind when you're seeing this picture.
First thoughts, folks. Don't even filter it. And our attendees, send us chats, send us questions. We do this on the fly.
This is Sharlen. So looking at this image, clearly the first thing that strikes me is Father Grappi and him being surrounded by Black people, right? He was one of very few white folks at the time that, began to support the Fair Housing March movement. And, again, this picture is so striking because, you not only have the American flag, at the center of the photo, and and supposed to be reflective of what the American flag, you know, stands for, right? Freedom and equality and everything. So much of that time wasn't. And so, you know, I'm grateful, you know, and Adam, I haven't learned about the Fair Housing March in school at all. I was so disappointed that I had to learn about this as an adult, and so much rich history that we have here in this city. But, you know, to know that there were individuals that stood alongside, you know, Black people to support them in their fight for equality.
Other panelists, thoughts, responses, feelings?
This is Ronda. To have an image that goes along with some of the conversations that I've heard over the years from family members, and knowing that I, again, like other panelists have mentioned, was not introduced to this in a school setting, but to see the pride in my family members' faces, and as they talk, it showed that we do have voice. We do deserve a seat at the table. We are deserving. And to hold that flag up is that sense of that freedom, that equality, that justice, and the fact that we are worthy of fighting for what we believe we have right to, right? And that we can come together in those efforts.
Rhonda, can I follow up something? You have family members who marched, maybe youth council members?
Just not necessarily that marched, but were around, that were like younger, and they mentioned seeing that and taking pride in that, those images, because, you know, they always compare to, man, there was a time, right? Nowadays, we might not come together as much as we need to, but there was a time when. So just in remembering their take or their perspective on this time period.
Absolutely.
And we are getting some comments from some attendees. I want to make sure along the way to share these comments as they come in. Tanya says that this image is timeless. The faces, the clothes, the feeling, that this image here is the moment. Go ahead, jump in, folks.
Yes, I agree with what everybody said. I'm just looking at this. I'm not sure if this is who it is on my left. This young person to the left, like this younger child, and just looking as this person is looking back, right, and just being able to see the people power, right, the struggle and the fight, right. These are like what we felt to, like what I'm so energized by is that what people fail to see is like these are young people. These are our young people leading a movement that even 50 years later, right, we still talk about. And then we do ourselves a disservice in forgetting, right, to remember the young people and lift them up and empower them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think that this is such a powerful picture. Like holding a flag, like radical, rah-rah, turned up energy has always been in youth. You know what I'm saying? And just thinking about the privilege that we have to serve young people is it's wonderful. And to just see that tenacity, right, that determination, that energy, just to still see it flourish and be able to be remembered in this time is amazing.
Amanda, I think you made our first meme. This is radical rah-rah turned up energy.
Yes.
Use it. Yes.
Let's get Camille in there. Camille, you got some thoughts for us?
Yeah, I don't know if my thoughts have to do with like the work I do or whatever, but what I see out of the picture is, like, I do see the empowerment, but I also see that, to me, it's a reminder. And to me, our flag is traumatizing because of stuff like this and footage that I just even recently watched when it was Black people with flags and the police was snatching the flags out of their hands. And so for me, I just see that with all of these years, all of these fighting, that it's just that we evolved into another level of racism. Like we evolved, but we're still in the same place all these years later. I'm looking at these pictures like my grandparents and my parents told me about this, but I'm still fighting for the same thing, for housing inequities and the same things in the neighborhood. So that's what my thoughts are when I see the images.
You know, Camille, one of the sort of prologue comments we'll make sometimes is that in the 50 years since this happened, the racism has been poured in the concrete of our infrastructure.
Mm.
So, you know, you may not see the people holding Nazi signs out in public,
Right.
but we sure have invested billions and billions of dollars into the segregation that began and was evidently on display during these open housing marches.
You know what? We have a
see the
saying.
Nazi
Wait,
emblem
let me
today.
just say real quick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say real quick. We say in the hood, we say that the hoods changed into suits and judge robes and police suits and things like that. So they KKK hoods switched to those things, to suits and judge robes. So.
And actually, I mean, not even change, because all right, we'll get to some of those other images. Why don't we do, Rob, do you want to do this one?
Yeah, you know, this is my favorite image, and I think given recent developments over the last few days, we are constantly reminded about the brutality that is state violence enacted by law enforcement on Black bodies. And this picture right here, there's so much tension in that open space. It ain't nothing but space and opportunity right there. And you see young men doing all they can to remain civil in the face of an uncivilized police force. And deep in the photo, you see the clash, and you can just see it moving forward in this image. This one here is just, man, this is the one that gets me the most, and there are a lot of them.
Definitely appropriate in this very moment.
Thoughts about this image, folks? Any comments at all?
This is Sharlen. I would definitely agree with you. This is definitely a powerful image, and you know, you think then and now, and I just, you know, think about how, you know, I think about how King, you know, talked about nonviolent and not, you know, responding to adversary without being violent. And you know, it's a hard thing. And I look at the brother in the on the what side is this? In the left side, and how his hands are together, and it's just like, you know, I'm like, I know something is going to happen, but you know, I got to keep my composure. And man, I tell you, I think about just even today, and we think about the racism, we think about, like, you cannot be Black in America without, you know, experiencing some form of violence, whether it's, you know, housing discrimination, employment discrimination, health discrimination, you know, education like, those are all forms to me of violence. And, you know, we're still fighting today for some of the same things. And, you know, it's heartbreaking.
And part of the reason we were so excited about this conversation, and this is really directed at the educators who joined us and who will see this, we want to encourage you, always get your local folks, your local activists, your local experts into your classrooms however you can, because these folks bring these questions and these ideas that we try to teach. They bring them alive in so many important ways. And so your expertise is valuable, extraordinarily valuable, as we think about teaching history, especially because so many of these issues are still with us. And Command Central is telling us we need to move forward, Adam. So Keisha's keeping us on track.
Let's just do a lightning round. If folks, some of these images here, let's just get a little comment on Vel Phillips. We wanted to show kind of the contrast of Vel at work and Vel at work, right? Like, this is her in the Common Council building, and this is her with the Youth Council. Two very different moods, two very different probably senses of efficacy, and kind of where her efforts are rewarded. Anybody want to make any quick reflections on Vel?
Yeah, let's play with this one right here. This
yes,
is a good one too.
Yes. I would just like to say, like, I think based on the image of like her smiling and like dancing with the youth council, and then versus this image that we see right now, is like, you can see the different energy. Like, when you're around your people, you feel a different type of energy, right? in this image right here, she's fighting for the equities and the inequalities of the Black people and the people, period. And then when you switch back, she's able to see like the product of that fight, right? To be able to see the young people are still continuing the fight, to be able to see that they understand their power, their knowledge, their education, right? Because during the time that the young people were in the NAACP Youth Council, they were being educated around everything that makes them their history that they weren't learning in schools and different things like that. So to be able to be immersed in that energy and have that time to just reflect and be able to relax and rejuvenate is really wonderful. And I think Vel Phillips is like the epitome of why, you know, people are still fighting today.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Go ahead, Camille.
I just want to jump in, just as an activist and as a woman, a mother in the community. I just think it displays, like, when you have a passion, a true passion in your heart for the community, it's not just 9 to 5. It's not just whatever your job title is. It's life.
Yes.
As you live, eat, and breathe community, like the youth, the people of the community, like that is your family. So you're legit fighting for them when they're not in those rooms, at those tables, at those meetings, and then you're there on the ground with them when you're off, just because, not even for a job, like you just spend time in the community. So I just really have to say that, because even with the women on the panel and my journey, even, like, it's my passion, even with my tragedy, even with my, you know, trauma and the things we go through, that's the resilience and what helps us fight the fight in the community.
That's it. Yeah. And to add on to what Camille was saying, it's not an either or.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to share.
Say more of that,
Charlen. It's not the either or, because just the representation that Vel, I mean, you see this woman, this Black woman, the only Black woman, you know, sitting in as an older woman around these white men, and, you know, and each time to put down legislations or policy, and, you know, to have them continuously struck down, it wasn't easy. And that previous image that you had with Vel Phillips, that, you know, she kind of got her energy, you know, because she knew that she was I'm here not representing myself. I'm representing an entire community, right? I know they can't sit here with me at the table, but the energy that I get, and, you know, the community that we're going to build on the outside to, you know, just continue to support people, liberate people, give them that hope, right? I know, you know, it's that, you know, her saying, you know what, I'm here with you. You know, I'm here with you on the street, and I'm going to take that same energy and I'm going to, you know, use that while I sit around this table. She is absolutely one of my sheroes, because I know what she did was not easy at all, but it was, like Amanda would said, it's not easy, but it's necessary.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Adam, let's do one or two more, and then we want to get to some contemporary images.
Just one loaded comment before we move on. Maybe this is what the nonprofit industrial complex is too much this and not enough this. Yes. I will say I've seen a lot of my folks that I admire in professional spaces maybe being like way too deep into this, and then they don't feel this, and then they burn out and quit or whatever. So let's do one of these. Let's do this image. I think it's just one that, you know, like in the same way, this is something that we've discussed in past conversations, is in the same way it was just referenced by Amanda, that in the same way that the youth council represented a transfer of knowledge, so does this. This is actually an education as well, I guess. So I just wanted to say that. And what do you guys think? Or does it speak for itself?
Sure. What you think, Rhonda?
I think the idea that you still have folks now, right, that represent these individuals in this picture. And even as an educator, and I thought about it for a moment, I'm like, this is a hard one, because as an educator, I walk into buildings every day and I feel like I see these same people. And it's that idea of, perfect example of trying to convince us that a Black History program doesn't matter. We need to do a multicultural program.
Come on.
It cover everybody, but it's that idea that if Black lives don't matter, if you don't see value in a Black life, that speaks volumes. So making certain that our young people, as empowered as they are, as much as we empower them, we also have to be realistic and let them know that you do have adversaries out there, but you still have to keep pushing through. You still have to keep it moving, right?
Yes.
Because you are valued, you are worth. And that's why I always say you are worth the conversation. You are worth the movement.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, one point, this is before Photoshop or Canva. Look at the design of those signs, clearly professional. I think sometimes the counter protesters and the hate was actually organized. And I think that's an important, and resourced. I think that's an important point to see, is that this was like probably 2 or 3 days after the first march. So they were like ready. Like those might have been printed already.
Right.
Wow.
It looks like we have Reverend Baring with us. Is that correct?
Oh.
Joseph Baring?
Joseph Baring.
Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir. We'll get you in our Q&A right away. As soon as we get our next sets of comments going, Reverend, we'll get you into the conversation. So now we're going to move forward a little bit, and I want to make sure that the attendees and the panelists know that first section, we want to script it so that teachers can use these chunks in the classroom in very functional ways. And so now we're moving to our second chunking of ideas. And we're going to move into some contemporary images. And we're going to ask you to discuss activism today, talk a little bit about what's going on in Milwaukee, the work you're up to, who are some of these key groups, and then we'll get our audience into the mix afterwards. So let's talk about some contemporary images and make some connections across history. So Adam, why don't you jump back in and show us some of the contemporary photos that we want to talk about.
You know, the largest protest in the history of the state of Wisconsin for a pretty long time was the nonviolent response Milwaukee saw to the assassination of Martin Luther King. That has since been, at least in Milwaukee, been those records. There have been much larger marches in recent years organized by Voces de la Frontera. Here's just a couple images, examples of those. And like the first round panelists, I'm going to spin through all of them and then come back around. I want to share this image because we have some specific representation here. But even if you weren't here, I would share these because of how important this group has been, Urban Underground, and actually ACLU's in this image as well. Just wanted to share time has been really weird the last few years, and just a reminder of some of the recent past with the marches for Dontre Hamilton that happened just a handful of years ago. Then followed by protests for Sybil Smith, who was shot and killed. Some of those dramatic images from Sherman Park. Also, some of the aftermath, which looked like a mural and also looked like this incredible space. I was just looking at this picture today and feeling just homesick, I guess, maybe is a word for it. Then also U-Black, another group, and the Women's Empowerment March that they organized. And a group named Leaders Igniting Transformation, some of their young people and some of their work. And then actually, I just wanted to, this image, which I feel like I shouldn't have had to make in Canva. I feel like this should exist somewhere already. And I know there are more alumni of Urban Underground than this, but I just wanted to share that, even speaking to what a little bit of what Rhonda was referencing before, how, some of the racist undergirding of our conversation exists in legislative spaces as well. So that is our circle. And actually, there's Sharlen in this one. So now let's open it up. What do you guys want to share a little bit of what kind of 50 years, a little over 50 years now later, what activism looks and feels like in your life in the city and in these images?
And also tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
This is Camille. I just want to say real quick with some of those images, I think it would be safe to say all the ladies had some kind of part in those Sherman Park activities. In the rebuilding back in Sherman Park. I think that it's a amount of unity in the community, but I don't think that it's the amount in numbers that we need to see. I think we're often as a community divided on a lot of the issues that we need to stand together on. And I think that if we could unify more in numbers and come together, that we would be able to get more things moving forward. It seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like a lot of the images in the past, or some of the unity or the people in numbers for when there were issues in the city, it seemed to me as if they have more standing together than we do today as an activist. I don't see the support in the community at the events and the activities for the people doing the things, or in numbers when there are issues in the city. Although I do think it is a small groups in the city who do often work together, kind of interchangeable, to make some of the things happen in the city. And I do think that we're pretty good at, even though everybody might have differences, in realizing that regardless of what people's personal opinions are or differences are, just putting the community first and what's best for everyone first. If we can move more towards that, I think we could do better as a whole with our activism. And I think we also need to, besides walking and protesting, we need to look at changing legislation on some of the issues that we have problems with, and focus a lot more on that, and moving that energy forward.
Yes, Camille. Can I just add to that point as well? I hear you, what you're saying, Camille, as far as, we just, when we think about, what has happened 50 years ago, and we look at what's going on right now, when communities get crumbs, right? So, for example, Black people, we're going to now allow you to live in these neighborhoods, right? We're going to buy up your property in particular areas, and you can move out to Northridge, or you can move in particular, we're opening up particular areas where you can move to. We've seen some changes, some more significant than others, right? When it comes to the movement of people of color and communities, of color in the city of Milwaukee. So it's this sort of complacency where it's just like, well, wait a minute, we don't have to fight too much, right? They're allowing us to live in this neighborhood, or they're allowing us to, go to these schools now, right? And so that level of urgency over the years have shifted, and our folks have just gotten complacent that, we're literally at this point still only getting crumbs. And
some of them forgot where they came from.
Yes.
I was gonna say, yes.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
It's that idea of identity. We have to continue educating in regard to our history, because if we don't know where we come from, we don't know the power of collective responsibility, of solidarity, that we do need numbers, that we do have to come together, that we do have to listen to one another, that we do have to engage. It can't be that idea of, I know I went away to school and people were like, why go back to Milwaukee? Why not? Milwaukee is what crafted me to be the woman that I was away at college. So I don't think we really are. I think it's an issue of identity. Who are we as we relate in this, in society?
Absolutely. One of the most important components to history and the study of history is connecting generations. That is more than anything else the importance of history, the way that we are able to get young people thinking about their past, because it so critically shapes the present.
I want to just say too, just to acknowledge, real quick, Reverend Joseph Baring is here, who is a commando from Madison, who's been present with us for several events, and just the fact that he continues to share this story and be present with young people and spend time with them. And I know he does a plenty of work up in Madison where he calls home. That's been a phenomenal outcome of the last few years of the 50th anniversary, is having a chance to get some of those intergenerational conversations going. And Sharlen, you've been a big part of that too.
Absolutely. Adam, scroll through
Yes,
more of those
thank you.
images for us.
Which way? You want to go this way?
And really quick, while Adam does that, I just really quickly wanted to touch on that education piece. Because as Rhonda said, and I would love for Amanda to chime in on this as well, just the importance of being able to teach the young people what has happened then and connecting it to now. Because our young people are lulled, we use the word urban underground, and underground was derived from the Underground Railroad, and how it is so critically important to bring our young people into this light, into this consciousness of, okay, I don't want you to get complacent with the music and the clothes and all these other, the social media, all these other things that are literally designed, I think, to distract you from the true issues that are going on. But that education piece is incredibly critical.
Yes to everything everybody has said. I think that the education piece is one of our barriers, especially right now. It's always been a barrier, but especially right now during COVID, right? Like the ways that our oppressors are using the education, the barriers to getting quality, equitable education during this time has been very critical. I've seen it play out in my household, right? As far as like young people not having the access to like internet and computer issues and different things like that. But just thinking about how young people's minds are developed, right? That structure, that discipline, that encouragement, and that neediness to know exactly who you are. I think that we spend a lot of time, especially in like nonprofits and different things, trying to build up like the money, right? The money and the membership versus the actual community of each other, right? We have to really, one of the things that we do at Urban Underground is one of the critical pieces is our community building, and being able to let the young people know, like, even though you come into this and you don't know each other, the thing that you get out of this is having somebody to lean on in the end. And we tell them, like, we know y'all all not gonna like each other. We know y'all all ain't gonna be singing Kumbaya at the end, but you will all be able to have somebody that you can call on in your times of need, right? We, especially during this time, we have young people starting their own group chats and saying, just checking in, just seeing how you doing and different things like that, and being able to call upon what we believe is community. Because a lot of people are saying, like, we lost this sense of community, like young people don't know community. But I beg to differ a lot of the times, because young people, when they are taught what that looks like to be a true brother and sister in this community, they begin to show that. We had the pleasure of having leaders from 414 Life and My Sister's Keeper come in and really be able to show our young people at Urban Underground, what does this community look like? We even had the pleasure of having one of the commandos come in and talk to our young people about what organizing looks like, what it looks like to stand up for justice, and what it looks like to really be an advocate member in your community, because you have to understand your individual power in order to be able to comprehend what it means to have collective power and really shift that energy forward. And one of the things that I love to say and put in the air is, like, energy is neither created nor destroyed. So that same energy that has manifested in Maya Angelou, Alberta Harris, and Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King, and all of the greats, Vale Phillips, before us, is still in us and still moving through the energy today. We just have to tap into it and just say, are you really ready to receive it, right? I understand, sometimes we get burnt out, we lose energy and different things like that. But being able to lean on our mentors and our people in our community to just be able to have your back. I had the pleasure of talking to a young person, and she was able to give me what I needed. You know what I'm saying? Just being able to mentor me and what I needed for that moment. And it was so many times that I was there for her, but it felt so wonderful and I was so grateful to have received that same mentorship that I was able to give her that one time. And it was just beautiful to see the cycle of life, if you will, to be able to come in and be able to show us we need each other, right? We need young people just as much as young people need us, right? We all come in this world and we coexist to just be great, to just be greater than what we see today. And I think the housing marches really show us how the narrative was this, and now it's not that anymore. You know what I'm saying? And being able to see that we can make a change, and even though it's evolved into different things, we can do it, right? We can do it. We do got this, and we got this. Like, I believe in us. I've always believed in us, and I believe in the power of young people leading these movements forever and ever.
And I think one of the things that I'd like to say with all the work that you folks have been doing, whether it's Urban Underground, Lit, all the groups that we've seen, this powerful image of these young men who've moved into important political positions. Part of what we have to continue to do, and where we didn't do a good job for so long, was to educate young people on the importance of civics and civic engagement, and not civic engagement in a very broad or hollow sense, but civic engagement that encourages them to engage with the political process. Civic education that encourages them to demand more of elected officials and then go on to become elected officials. And so the question of civics and civic engagement is crucial to that identity formation that we spoke of, because indeed, we are all capable of having an imprint and impacting policy, and to give young people the opportunity to do so. Young people, we say this in all of our conversations, nothing changes without young people. Young people push us.
That's it.
Young people dare us to imagine a world that for many of us, we can't even see. And so thank you for all the work that you all do, and for continuing to inspire our young people in so many powerful ways. Command Central is telling us we've got 15 minutes left, and we want to move to some Q&A. I want to give our panelists the opportunity to say anything before we move to Q&A. Any other comments folks want to make about the images? Any other thoughts that folks want to share? And then we'll get into some Q&A. And Reverend Barron, we're coming to you first. Any other thoughts, panelists, before we get into some Q&A?
I just want to say, I think about when you asked, about being an activist. I don't, so in the community, I do what I do, but I do a lot of work in the background. But I do think it is important for every single individual that is exposed to this conversation to think of yourself as an activist. There is something that you need to advocate for, push for. And I think that goes to Camille's point of grouping ourselves together. Being more unified is everyone seeing themselves as a part of these movements. So we can no longer sit on the sidelines and think, oh, well, I'm not an activist, that's not for me. No, it is for everybody. It's just figuring out what part you will play in moving the conversations forward.
That's it. And this is Sharlen. I just wanted to reiterate, Rob, I love that you said that, young people push us. When you think about every single movement, young people were part of those movements. And so they have the energy, the tenacity, the drive, to that they're amazing. And they really push us to a different level. And that picture that that was previously up with David Bowen, David Crawley, and Kaylin Haywood, who are all members of Urban Underground. It's just powerful, to me, to see these young people. And these are just a snippet, of them that have gone on to do really incredible and amazing things. As adults, we just provide the space, for them to lead and to grow and to develop. We just need to nurture that. So I love, the work that we do, and we just need to believe, all of us just need to continue to believe in our youth.
That's right.
I just wanted to say real quick too that a lot of people often look at us as teaching the youth. We got to remember that they're our teachers too, and that we got to learn and grow from each other. So I just wanted to note that.
So just having spent a lot of time with the open housing marches, I just want to make two quick points that tied with what you all have been saying, that the open housing, the youth council had mounted a handful of different campaigns before open housing, and their groups weren't humongous. Like the first open housing march was about 250 people. And it was when they found the flashpoint of open housing was actually the tidal wave of hate that they encountered that made them know they were doing the right thing. So in some ways, like those weren't massive marches until they found the right topic to inflame a response, I guess. And another point, Sharlen, you mentioned one thing that was really important to the youth council was music and clothing and culture. If you see, one of the questions I've kind of asked a lot of the youth council members is, how did you guys stay together for 200 consecutive nights of marching? Part of it was their love for each other and their desire for justice. But another piece was like, they had cool t-shirts, they sang songs together. They were like each other's, like they were creating culture too. And I think, I hear what you're saying is that there's a lot of consumer culture that is absolutely a distraction from what's important, but also the importance of like creating culture within the movement.
Yes.
That cannot be lost, because that was, so young people, like in the same way young people are always making change, there are some pieces of young people that never changes too, which is that thirst for culture.
I am going to engage our attendees by starting with Reverend Baring. Reverend Baring, you are unmuted on our end, so we can hear you. Your hand's been up for a while. Adam talked about the youth councils. Talk to us a little bit, Reverend.
I thank you for allowing me to even speak. I was sitting here today listening to what everyone had said and watching the slides that Adam had put up. One of the things I realized sitting here today, after the events that have taken place in this country the past 3 or 4 days, past 10 days really, that in 67, 68, and back in the 60s, that period of time with the youth council and everything, we marched and we demonstrated. We did a lot of things, got open housing passed. When you look 50 years from then, all of those opportunities to live anywhere you wanted were good. But then unemployment knocked that out, because then you couldn't afford to live wherever you wanted. People demonstrated 50 years ago. People are demonstrating now. Every time there's a murder, people demonstrate. Every time there's an injustice, people demonstrate. And there's nothing wrong with demonstration. There's nothing wrong with our youth getting together and helping our youth identify who they are. But one of the things a few of us pastors sat down yesterday and discussed is that all of the marching that we've done over the years, even yesterday in Minneapolis with the marching, we've marched and marched and marched for 50 years, and we really haven't changed the playing field. You can't legislate the change of hearts and minds. We've got more Black mayors, more Black congressmen, more governors than we've ever had. And the playing field doesn't change. And what we really discussed was that what we need to get our young people to do now, what young white kids and Black kids did in the South some years ago when they started to change the playing field in the South. We need to get our young Black children, Black people, to engage their white friends so that their white friends take responsibility for what's being done. Until good white people stand up and speak up, I don't care how many marches we go through, it's going to keep going on the same way until hearts and minds are changed. Back in the 60s, we marched and marched, and then we had a Black Christmas. You can adversely impact the economy, Black people, by withholding their money. March, 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 economic empowerment to Black people, but you have to change the hearts and minds of people before the playing field's going to change. You got more cameras now, and the police are not even afraid of you with your camera now. So there needs to be a different way as we educate young people in this new normal. I mean, we have to do something different. We have to put our heads together to figure out a way. And the first way is to get white people to understand this issue with implied bias and all the rest of this racial problems that are impacting us in a negative way. And we've got good white people. If you impact them and cause them to impact their friends, I think the playing field will change. But that's basically what I have to say.
Well, Reverend, we appreciate you. We appreciate you not only for what you've done in the past, but what you obviously continue to do. And we thank you for being such an important vessel of history to connect those generations. For our panelists, again, this is for the classroom. This is to help us do better in instructing our young people. What should we be talking about? What should we be instructing them about? What should they be hearing from educators from your vantage point as activists? Complement the classroom for us.
I think that one of the things that we as adults often do is decide these things and stuff. We should ask them, what do they want to know about, or what do they want to talk about, and start off with some things that they're curious about, and just find relatable experiences, because I think when they can relate or see that you can relate to some experiences that they're going through, or that you may have went through some things, then they find a connection. When you have a connection, you build trust. And then they're more receptive. They respect what you're saying a lot more. So I just kind of let things be organic. But in a classroom setting, I would just start off with some of the things that we know are the same issues. Tell them where it started, how far it went back. We don't hear a lot of the things like Adam said about our local history or about things. We remind them of who they are and where they came from, and let them know. I've learned a lot even in my work in the community. I just recently learned about other parts of the riots and the police station getting bombed here in Milwaukee, and just all kinds of things about the history of housing. So it's always a revolving learning experience. Just cultivate that as you grow, and find out ways to find out what their interests are.
Other panelists, chime in. What should we be talking about in the classroom?
To Camille's point too, I think it calls for educators to be willing to be vulnerable and creating brave spaces. I've just recently learned not necessarily a safe space, but a brave space for the dialogue to take place. I remember when the school that I'm in currently, I started working there right after the Sherman Park incidents, and educators were even afraid to talk about those conversations, but it was the idea that the children sitting in your classroom, that's their neighborhood in which they live in. So that speaks volumes to a child, and it makes them question whether or not they're even, you have an interest in the child. So really showing children that, their history matters, that there is a history there, and use visual literacy. That's basically what we've done in this panel discussion, visual literacy. Because a lot of people say, I'm not comfortable with the conversation. It's not about your comfort though. I'm not so concerned about what you're comfortable with any longer, but I do want children to be educated. So use pictures and allow children to craft the conversations around those pictures, but we can no longer lead with our fears. We have to get out of that's a form of complacency. And feeling and organic, we fear organic. It has to be planned, everything. There's parts of it that can be planned, but they respect authenticity. So the more authentic you are, they'll be receptive to that. And I think that can, open the conversation, and bringing local folks in. I don't think we invite, our community into our classrooms as much as we should.
That's Ronda, you hit so many points that we've been advocating for through this process, which is when we bring people so one of the last things we did before the pandemic was Reverend Joseph Baring, along with Fred Reed and Peggy Rosga, spoke to South Division High School. And it's very different to hear this story abstractly versus see the images and then meet the people. It doesn't feel like it's someone else's history when, the authors are there with you.
We've got a really great point from Miss Jacqueline Boyd, who talks about the challenges with white teachers in particular being afraid to talk about these tough issues. Do you all have any tips for educators, particularly educators who are working with white colleagues, or maybe some direct advice to white educators in particular? How can we give them the courage that you speak of? Do you have any tips on that? Folks, join these conversations for those teaching ideas. What can you say specifically to some of our white educators about this?
This is Sharlen. I would say that we have a plethora of resources in this community
Yes.
to be able to reach out, just even asking the question, hey, who can I connect with that can provide information about X, Y, and Z? Like there's we have some great individuals in this community that absolutely would be willing to share information, share resources, and even be willing to go into the classroom. And I love what Ronda, said that, we have to start doing some things differently when it comes to education. We have to abandon this traditional sort of methodology of how we teach and how we educate young people. And so, yes, even though it absolutely has to be authentic, there has to be ways for us to use the many great resources that we have in the city. And maybe even, I don't know if there's some sort of clearinghouse. Adam, you probably would know something that there is, an online resources where educators can go that may have links and, information that they can connect to. But to absolutely be vulnerable, to have I love that word, Rhonda, brave space, so that, because even if you're a white teacher, that doesn't mean that you cannot teach Black history or, teach a historical context around, about people of color. It's a conversation that has to be embedded more into our educational system and not just looked at like, oh, it's February, it's Black History Month, and we don't have these conversations throughout the entire year. So we really have to abandon this the traditional means of education and start looking at innovative ways of educating our children.
Sharlen, you all as panelists are a part of building that reservoir of resources specific to our local experiences. And so that's what we are doing right now. We've got one more comment that I want to make sure we get to, and then we will wrap up and be respectful of you all's busy schedules. We have a comment from Joe, who's asking us to think about bringing together African refugee communities, Hmong communities, LGBTQ communities as well. Do you all have any ideas, or have you done some work across some of these communities? How do we build a much more collective conversation? You got any tips on that, or do you have some experiences with that? And then we'll go ahead and wrap up.
I worked with this is Camille. I'll be real short too. I think like for most things, if you just go out into the neighborhood, this speaks across the board for the youth, for the different communities you just mentioned too. Just step outside of the box and step into the neighborhood, break the barriers. And then you'll start to build relationships from there. Just in my experience, just go out there, let them know you care. Once they see you care, build those relationships and go from there.
Mm-hmm. Really quick, this is Sharlen. We've worked with HAWA, the Hmong American Women's Association. We've also worked with the LGBT Community Center and other, groups that people would consider non-traditional groups. It's a matter of just reaching out and saying, hey, let's have a conversation. I remember when we connected with like the LGBT Community Center and we said, you know what, let's, our staff and their staff and our young people and some of their young people came up with a session and a workshop where each group, we picked a day, we got some food and we had great conversation. We broke bread together and we were able to dialogue, right? And it was so meaningful that it was the fact that folks were intentional about pulling the different groups together. Same thing with HAWA. They showed up at some of our hearings and some of the things that we were doing. It's about being intentional and reaching across the divide. So yes, it is meaningful work, but we have to be intentional about it.
Yeah, young people never ask for the geography that divides them.
That's it. That's it.
Before we wrap up, I want to give a shout out to Heather Godley and Kristen Leffelman. These folks, they're in our attendee group. They're educators as well as working over at the Wisconsin Historical Society. They've been building some digital curricula for us, and we'll make sure to get those out to folks. Most of the people who join us are educators, and so we appreciate the fact that folks are willing to take some time during this particular moment to develop these classroom strategies and these classroom opportunities. In fact, coming up on May 29th, we're going to have a bit of a happy hour conversation to talk about this very difficult question of how do you teach race and equality in the classroom, particularly younger people. You know, some issues are a little harder to teach with younger folks, and then some issues are not, you know. So we're going to have those kinds of conversations and put this digital space to work in the way that we've talked about. And then in June, we're going to actually spend that month talking about Latino history in Milwaukee in very much the same way. And so folks, I'm gonna wrap us up so that we can end our Facebook live stream, but then we are going to have a few minutes backstage, if you will, to continue our conversation for the attendees who want to continue to have a little bit of dialogue. So we'll ask our panelists to stick around for another 10 or 15 minutes if you have the time to have folks who may not have had a chance to get into our conversation. And so on behalf of this effort, I'd like to thank Camille Mays, Ronda Davis, Amanda Buchanan, Sharlen Moore. Thank you all so very much for sharing your time with us today. Thank you for being willing to take a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this conversation, by which we are hoping to do a better job and create a richer set of classroom experiences. But maybe most importantly, thank you for your tireless efforts, because we know what you do, we see what you do, and we thank you. And indeed, you have jobs, but your careers clearly are about making Milwaukee and our nation a better place. And so we thank you so very much, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm giving
Thank
rounds of
you.
applause here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
So we're going to end the Facebook stream now, but we're going to continue to have conversations here backstage.
I wanted to say one quick thing about teaching it, especially for white educators, which is not to over-center Grappy. I'm not saying omit him or leave him out of the narrative, but growing up in Milwaukee, the only thing I ever heard about was Grappy, maybe a little bit of Vel, and it's important to acknowledge just how, I mean, not just how central the youth council, the commandos were, and as the predominant authors of the story. I think, and that's something that, frankly, I think for the last 50 years, you do get your woke white history teachers that want to talk about this, but they want to over-center Grappy. And I think a young person's going to turn off, or I know they turn off when they see the images, hear about Grappy, but no one else. as Sharlen, as you pointed out in that first image, like,
yeah,
there's a ton of black people in that image. If all you're seeing is Grappy, I don't think you're seeing the whole picture.
Right.
To our attendees, everybody, you got the opportunity to share with folks here if you'd like. So please, if you have any comments or if you have any thoughts, you're unmuted, and you can jump in as needed. We are all Zoom savvy these days, so we know how this works. If anybody wants to share some thoughts before we have to let our panelists get out of here, please do. Jump right in if you'd like.
Okay, this is Jacqueline Boyd. Hi.
Hey, Ms. Boyd, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, Dr. Smith. So I was thinking about an ethnic community get-together and how we would go about doing that, because I know at least the area where I live is Merrill Park, like Juneau, 30th and Juneau area. And there's a lot of ethnic groups around here. And I know it's a lot of different, like the immigrants that come here from Africa. It's a new city that a lot of immigrants are coming from. I used to greet them at the airport when I worked there in operations, and they would come over here to a church. I believe it's on 60th and Holly Road is where they house them. But they have a big ethnic get together every year. I know it's in the summer. I would have to find out when it is, but that would be a start, I think, to get ethnic groups together. and then just have one big sea of, I don't know, ethnicity, food, and getting to know each other. And
Well, we
you
don't
know,
we don't lack for any festivals. You know, we might
Right.
fail.
Right.
You know, we only got 3 or 4 months of
think there-
sunshine.
Right.
I mean, there is a point even to the structure of those festivals, because those are one at a time, which is a little different than I think was just being proposed. Do you know what
Sure.
I'm saying? Like,
Right.
there are kind of bound, not that folks aren't invited to partake in a culture that's not specifically their own indigenous culture, but I think there's a slightly different point there, which is like, you know, it's like, come to our place, but how do you create a shared home turf?
Right.
Mhm.
Particularly around some rights-based issues that cross us all. And this is where questions around human rights and whatnot are still so pivotal, because there's some basic human rights issues that we all are experiencing abuses, particularly with our current administration in DC, and then obviously our legislature. We've all experienced some of the racial hatred that we need to think about how it crosses us, you know. Any other attendees want to jump in?
I have something from last week that I thought was a really interesting comment that one of our panelists said that I want to get current week's panelists' view on, is that the marches, when we look at historically how long they went on, specifically Milwaukee, marching for 200 straight nights. That's a long time. And what our panelists from last week said is that, there was a commitment, not just based on.
Uh-oh,
It's
Keisha's
so
having some.
easy.
Keisha, you're breaking up. Just so you know.
Better now?
A little bit. Or not. No.
I want to share real quick one thing we were talking about doing this. We didn't get to it, but the memes that were referenced, that's like the worst one. Sorry for starting with that one. In the process of thinking about how to re-script this story in the imagination of our city, and particularly reach young people, Dasha Kelly helped us dream up this event, which is we asked people
that's good.
in actually attendance to some of these presentations to start captioning these images and respond to them emotionally, and not just because a lot of Rob says history is fun, and I didn't grow up history being that way. But I think but if this was the story, I think it would be. So I guess these are just some images. Some of them made, but like a really wide variety of people. Like some of these were Mount Mary students, actually. Like this might have been a nun that made this one. But we had, a pretty wide variety of people making these, and this is one of the ways we're kind of want to trick some of the. It's a really good point you make. Again, to come back to that point you made, Sharlen, of like, can you wield pop culture? Can you kind of make what young people are already doing a means of telling this story? This is my favorite one. Like, walks off and carry a big purse. Like,
that is a big purse. That is a huge purse, right?
I love it.
She's got to be ready for everything in that common council.
That's
right.
That's
it.
Right.
I'm sure there's, and I like this one a lot too, because there were different fires, one set by the KKK and one purportedly to be by accident by the police. I think this gets to just the fact that just who's armed in this image, right? And like,
right,
very similar to what we've been seeing in the news. Like, this is also very strong.
Not if you fuck. Adam, my feelings are gonna be hurt if you don't show my contribution. You know that, right?
I gotta track that down. I don't know where it is, Rob.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if Wu-Tang's relevant with kids.
It's not. The Wu-Tang is for the children. That's what ODB said.
Rob made a Wu-Tang themed one, and the kids are like, "What's that?"
Oh man.
That's all right. That's all right.
That's
I'm
actually a
from
good
the
idea. I
90s. I
think
still wear cargo shorts and Timberlands, you know.
we're gonna have to add that concept. We're gonna have to see how we could weave that in this summer, Adam. That's not a bad idea
We're
at
doing
all.
it, Sharlen. You just committed to it.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
We've got 2 more minutes, and then we want to let these wonderful women get back to their work because we need them at work. Any other thoughts? Any other comments from our attendees before we end our conversation today?
Yeah.
I'm back again.
Hi. So this is Lisa with CURTO. I was wondering, we've talked a lot about youth participation and youth mobilization. How would you recommend getting the youth involved in everyone's lives to mobilize or sort of feel, I guess, how can we encourage them to get involved? And where should we direct them?
If I can jump in. I was part of an organizing class last semester, and we kind of talked about what Saul Alinsky calls cold anger, and it's like finding out like what you're angry about, like what are you angry about in your community, and then tapping into that anger that like a young person has or a person has, and using that to not like sit on it and just be angry and just be like, okay, these are all the things that are wrong in my community, but using that to drive towards fixing that and moving that into some solution based. So asking young people or the young people what is affecting you in your community, and how can you be part of the change, right? Because sometimes it's just like, this is the change that is happening, hop on board to this change, versus a young person really being able to connect with that change. Like a lot of young people are not trying to fight all the same battles. Yes, they don't care for school lunches, but everybody's not gonna want to jump on board to that fight. So being able to really tap into their self-interest and use that to navigate to where they want to go. Because a lot of organizations are just fighting that one fight, when Saul Alinsky and other organizers talked about multiple fights happening at the same time, so that energy can be moved in different ways, but using those multiple organizations or organized movements to bridge that organized people, organized power.
And you know, Amanda, that requires the educators, myself included, to not be fearful of frustration and anger, and in some cases rage.
That's it.
Yep.
We have to be very, very comfortable with that. Those feelings can very easily be turned into positive action if we don't run from them. You know, if we're not afraid of that, because it does disrupt what is a very hierarchical experience in the classroom. I think Camille talked about learning from young people, and others may have said it as well, but the thing that we have to do is democratize the classroom.
Yes.
You know, the classroom cannot be a place where there's one voice who imparts information and then the kids are supposed to absorb it. We are all responsible for the learning environment. Every single one of us. Because I tell you, I've never taught a class. I have yet to have a class where a young person didn't say something that I had never heard before. They will say things and I'll be like, whoa, that's heavy.
I mean, that's important to note in the history of the marches too, which is the young people of the youth council, the NAACP Youth Council, were pushing the adults of the NAACP. I mean, they were saying, whoa, slow down. And the youth council was, they were, Rob, you say this sometimes, they're the ones foolish enough to think that they should be, encountering this incredible resistance and keep going.
Yeah. Well, ladies, let us get you off of the phone or off of the Zoom call. Thank you so very much. We really, really appreciate you. This was exactly how we imagined wrapping up this month of discussions about the open housing marches, and you all knocked it out of the park as you always.
For the battery, and then
thank you.
I
Thank you so much for the invite. Appreciate you all.
Thanks. I said in the intro, this is the one I was most looking forward to, and you guys validated.
Hey,
thank you so much.
Hey, now.
All right.
Thanks,
okay,
Adam.
folks, we're going to end now. So thank you, attendees. All righty, take care. We appreciate you.
All righty, bye.
Bye-bye. Adam, Keisha, and others, why don't you hang around for just a second before we wrap up?